Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming in and for participating in our program today. My name is Jeff O'Handley. I'm the Program Director here for Otsego County Conservation Association. And I hope everybody's healthy and well. We're all kind of adjusting to this new world, and we're committed to continuing to bring good content, great content to you. And actually, I need to figure out how to share my screen here for a second because I am challenged. Here we go. Okay. Sorry, we always try to rehearse these things ahead of time, and we still have a little bit of a mess up. All right, so our program today is hunting the emerald ash borer, and we figured it's a pretty timely topic because this is around the time of year where this creature is going to start making itself felt. And if you see me kind of glancing off to the side here, it's because I also have my notes over on another device. And so let's get started. Okay. I think we've already covered some of this stuff. We request that people are muted. I think you were muted upon entering, and that's just because it is lunchtime. We figure avoid embarrassments of dogs barking or chewing or tea kettles going off, as in my house. You can say hello using the chat feature. You can use the chat for asking questions, and you can ask questions at any time. I will aim to answer them as we go, although I sometimes may defer a little bit depending on how it fits with what I'm going to be saying shortly. Okay, so just a quick note about OCCA, the Otsego County Conservation Association. We're a private nonprofit organization that dedicated to promoting the sustainable use and enjoyment of Otsego County's natural resources. We've been here since 1968, and I don't know exactly how long we've been involved in invasive species, but at least since the 1980s. And certainly it's an important topic. So we were looking for some content, different content to add online, and I figured,
that'll make them bigger.
I do a lot of invasive species work, and it's an important topic, so we figured we'd help people understand. So first things first, this is the layout of the program. We're going to have an introduction to the emerald ash borer, what it is, what it does, where it came from. And then in order to help you, the idea is to help you know what to look for. Okay, signs and symptoms of the emerald ash borer. And in order to understand if you have this invasive insect, you need to know what an ash tree looks like. So we're going to help you learn your ash from your elbow, so to speak. And then we'll cover the actual signs and symptoms of the emerald ash borer infestation. And then part 4, I've found it, now what? And that's the unfortunate part. We hope nobody has it, but sometimes we will. So meet the emerald ash borer. This is it. It's actually a very attractive insect. It's pretty small. It's that bright green, emerald green color. That's where the name comes from. Sometimes names for insects and birds and things mean you can't figure out what it means at all. Sometimes it's very descriptive. So this is it, bright, shiny green, bright metallic green. Okay, and it is a member of the order of insects known as beetles. So it has certain features in common with things like ladybugs or June beetles and such. It has 2 pairs of wings, and the 4 wings are hardened to make a cover that protects its back. Okay, and when it needs to fly, it will flip open those hardened covers and have a second pair of membranous wings that help it fly. And it also reveals that underneath that bright, shiny green is this sort of coppery colored abdomen. It's a very attractive insect, I have to say. It's quite pretty to look at. Now, when we look at these sort of pictures, it's easy to get the idea that this is an enormous insect, that it's, 3 inches long, 4 inches long, and, if it flies into your head, it'll knock you down. The reality is a little bit different. The emerald ash borer is quite small. So you see it can fit on a penny. It's, maybe up to a ½ inch long and about 3/8 of an inch wide. So it's not very big, very attractive, but not very big. Okay, and it's easy to overlook, and especially because the habit of the adult emerald ash borer is that you'll find it up in the treetops where you may not see it. Okay, um, it comes originally to us from Eastern Asia, from sort of northeastern China, Mongolia, Eastern Russia, Japan, the Korean Peninsula. And I get a lot of people who ask me about some of our forest pests. They say, how come we have so many forest pests that are invade from that part of the world? And it's a couple of factors. One is that the climate is similar. Okay, it's a temperate climate, much as we have here, with warm summers and cold winters. So when the ash borer arrived here, it found a climate that was sort of like home. The second thing is there's an abundant food source. So emerald ash borer, as the name describes, feeds on ash trees. It's a specific group of trees. There are ash trees over in that part of Asia, and there are closely related trees from that family that are found in the eastern part of the United States. Okay. And the other thing that kind of helped it is that when it got here, it found good climate, good food supply, but relatively little competition and few predators and pests that would curb its numbers. So it had no real curb on its population. Okay. Um, so one thing that did change in its behavior, though, is that over in its native range, it tends to be what's called a secondary pest, where it will feed preferentially on ash trees that are already injured or under great stress. And when it arrived here, it it seemed to decide to feed on previously healthy trees. Okay, nobody's entirely sure why that is. Okay, it did first turn up in the United States. It was first seen in the United States in Michigan in 2002, and it has rapidly spread now across much of the East. And it is believed to have arrived here in wood in shipping crates, and we'll see why in a second. Now, as this is a beetle, it has a beetle's life cycle. So egg hatches into a larval stage, which will go through several growth periods, and then it will undergo a metamorphosis stage, a pupal stage. So these are the larvae in different stages of their life. Okay, and they are, if you dig in your garden, you're probably familiar with beetle grubs. They're kind of similar. Looks a little like a caterpillar. If you were to flip these things over, you would see that they do have 6 legs, but that sort of wormy kind of body. Okay, at maximum stage, the larva maximum size will be maybe 1.5 inches long. Okay, and it is somewhat flattened because of where it lives and how it behaves. Okay, so the larva, what it does is, well, the adults will lay eggs on the bark of an ash tree, and when the eggs hatch, the larva will tunnel straight down into the bark into a layer of the tree known as the cambium. This is a thin layer right between the bark, the outer bark, and the inner hardwood. And this is the area, this is the vascular tissue of the tree. This is the circulatory system of the tree. So water is moving up, water and nutrients moving up from the roots. Food produced in the leaves is being transported throughout the plant. And the larva basically feeds in that layer. Okay, and a single larva does damage, and this is kind of what it looks like. Okay, this is what's known as a serpentine gallery. So the larva, and if you can see my cursor right here, will start out, and it basically zigzags kind of back and forth in this curving motion. Okay, feeding in that vascular tissue. You can also see how skinny this was. It started out as one of those tiny little larvae, and over time it grew and grew, and actually you see it right up here. Okay, and I do want to go back 1 second, sorry, to take a look at the larva. One of the distinctive characteristics of it is the shape of the abdominal segments. You see how they kind of flare out towards the back end. This is the head up here, by the way. These are the heads. Okay, it sort of flares out. It looks like a little bit like a bell. Okay, and that's a very distinctive feature on the emerald ash borer. Okay, so coming back to this, a single larva feeding in an ash tree is going to do some damage, okay, but not too bad. And it runs, again, these very distinctive serpentine galleries through the tree. Eventually, it will reach a stage where it's big enough and it will go into a resting phase, the pupa stage, and then it will, as an adult, it tunnels its way straight back up through the bark and out. The problem is each female can lay 60 eggs or so. And if you have multiple females on a tree laying eggs, you're going to have a lot more of these galleries. And in a heavy infestation, this is kind of what you end up with. Okay, so instead of one single gallery that's nice and compact, you get this kind of crazy scrawl of galleries cutting back and forth across each other. And I suspect that they change their pattern instead of this nice orderly pattern because they're running into each other and they're eating, and they suddenly find another gallery that's been eaten, so they veer off and they end up doing this kind of crazy, like I said, kind of crazy thing. Okay, so in terms of life cycle and when these things happen, okay, adults will emerge in May or June. Okay, so this is around the time now where we can expect to start seeing things happen, if it ever warms up. Okay, the adults will feed, mate, and lay eggs during the summer. So anywhere from late May if they emerge that early, but mostly through June and August. Okay? And the typical adult will live, a female might live maybe 3 to 4 weeks. A male will live a little less. So they typically, when they emerge, they'll feed for about a week, then they'll mate. The males will pretty much die. The females will feed again for a while, and then they will lay their eggs and die. Okay, the eggs will hatch in midsummer and late summer, and the larvae begin that feeding behavior, going through again about 3 growth stages, getting larger each time, and they'll feed right into the early winter, late fall, early winter, up until about November. And at that time, they just kind of stop what they're doing and kind of curl up a little bit and sit in, beneath the bark, go sort of dormant. Then in early spring, they will go through this pupal stage. They'll kind of wake up in late March and early April. It's kind of like they wake up to go to sleep. They'll form the pupa stage, which, if you think about like caterpillars, it's like a chrysalis almost. And this all takes place beneath the wood, beneath the bark. And then come May and June, they will emerge again as adults. Okay. And I realize I didn't say something about the adults. The adult larva, the adult EAB, emerald ash borer, feeds on leaves. They just chew little holes in the leaves. They don't do a whole lot of damage in and of themselves. Okay. Now, I mentioned that they were first found here in New York, not in New York, they were first found in the United States in Michigan in 2002. This is a map showing the current distribution of emerald ash borer in the States. It now is found in 35 states. 5 Canadian provinces. It arrived, from, I can't remember where, I think it was near Detroit in Michigan in 2002. It was found in New York in 2004. And it has spread pretty widely along the thruway corridor, as well as downstate. It was slow to get to Otsego County, first arrived in Otsego County around 2012. Okay. By themselves, they don't fly too far. The adults don't fly too far in search of new trees. They're mostly transported by people, transporting firewood. Okay? And I did mention that they were believed to have been brought into this country in shipping crates, because those larvae, when they're in that dormant period in particular, you can mill lumber, you can cut down trees and process lumber, and you might actually be bringing larvae around, okay? And they frequently transport in firewood as well. Not the greatest map, but in Otsego County to date, the only known reported sightings are where these green dots are, concentrated around Sydney, Unadilla, getting towards Gilbertsville, okay? And getting towards Otsego. Right now, we had a question, and I don't know if this person is on the call today, about Worcester. To my knowledge, it has not been found yet in Worcester. It has not been confirmed. However, it seems to be creeping along. It seems to be creeping along the Route 7 and I-88 corridor. If you head out west, or if you head out further west on I-88 towards this Binghamton, you will see definite signs of emerald ash borer out there. If you drive through Pennsylvania, you see it in large numbers. Okay. In terms of why we should care, basically an emerald ash borer infestation will kill healthy ash trees in 2 to 4 years. Okay, once they get going, it takes off. And in terms of ash trees are something that are important for industry. They're important for wildlife, an important part of the New York State forests, making up about 8% of the trees in New York State's forests. So losing those ash trees is going to have repercussions for the environment. And they were also widely planted as street trees and park trees and shade trees. So, many of you are probably concerned about whether you will be finding emerald ash borer on your property and what to do about it. So, this is changing our forest environment and our environment here through the states. Okay, so that's the nutshell of the emerald ash borer itself. Now we want to talk about telling your ash from your elbow. The good news on emerald ash borer is that it is very host specific. It feeds on ash trees. In New York State, we have 3 species of ash that we have to worry about. So, unlike something like an Asian longhorn beetle, which feeds on, a whole bunch of different species, we're only concerned with finding ash right now. Okay. And so what we're going to do to try to figure this out, to find out if you have an ash tree, is go through a series of steps to help you identify it. So people always say, well, how do you identify trees? A lot of people to look at the leaves, and we're going to jump back and forth between a couple of different techniques. So the first thing to do is to look at whether your tree that you're worried about has needles or not. And if it has needles, that's good news, because you don't have an ash tree. Okay, an ash is a broadleaf tree, so it has, what we think of as leaves as opposed to needles. Next, we're going to forget about the leaves for a minute, and we are going to look at the branching pattern. Okay, so what do I mean by the branching pattern? If you look at a branch on a tree, you'll see that the leaves and twigs arise from that in one of 2 patterns primarily. In one case, it can sort of walk up the branch. Okay, so it's like following footsteps, right? Left, right, left. Okay, and if it has that sort of pattern, sort of a zigzag pattern, we say that it is alternate. Okay, it's alternate. They alternate their way up the branch. The other pattern you might see is where instead of walking, they kind of hop. So hop, 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 2 feet together, right? I want to have a little sound effects, so it's bing, bing, bing. And if it has that kind of pattern, it's said to be opposite. Okay, so most species of trees in New York have alternate patterns. A few have opposite. The good news is, if the tree you're looking at has this alternate pattern, it's not an ash. Okay, so ashes, now we know that it's a broadleaf tree, doesn't have needles, and branches grow opposite each other. Okay, so let's take a look at this and see what we mean. If we look at this particular tree here, would you say this is opposite or alternate? And I actually can't see the chat screen here, but you can pop in and say which one you think it is. All right, and this is opposite. Okay, and this might be pretty easy. And again, if you follow the cursor, you can see here's our main branch, and here's side twigs coming out, side branches coming out, side branches coming out, right? Directly opposite. This one's pretty easy to see. Okay, and I tend to think I show my age sometimes, because when I look at these trees, it makes me think of old TV antennas, kind of the arrangement. Okay, how about this one? This is a blurry photo. I apologize for this. I'm having middle-aged eyes, so I look at the screen on my camera and say that's in focus, and then I look at the picture and say it's a little bad. Okay, this one is alternate. So now we're not looking. In this case, we're not looking at branches, but we see here's the twig, and what we see here, these little bumps, these are buds. So if I go back to this site, this is just up the street from my house. If I go back there today, these will be turning into leaves and little branches coming out. But you can see they do that zigzag, right? One side, then the other, then one side, then the other. Okay, that one is fairly easy. What about this one? Okay, this one is also opposite. Okay, and so if we look, we follow this twig down. Here is a little node, and you have a branch growing out to this side with leaves and things. And then here we have another little stub of a branch. This one maybe got eaten by a deer, or maybe it died off. And then we come further up, and here's another one that grows out. And here is where a little branch should have been, but again, something happened to it. Okay, and it's very careful. You have to be very careful when you oh, let's see. We do have a question popping in, I think. Oh, okay. Thank you, Amy. She just popped in a good guide, handy guide for recognizing ash trees, and we'll also send the list of resources to everybody, okay, afterwards. So again, you have to look, it's helpful to look at probably the last 2 or 3 feet of a branch, and to look at more than one sort of side twigs, because sometimes things get broken, or they get eaten, or they die, or things. Okay. All right, let's see. Next one, we'll move. Oop, oop, sorry, I gave it away. Okay. Is this opposite or alternate? I've already given it away by overzealous clicking. This is opposite. And this is tricky again, because again, you know, my perspective on this is this branch may either attach right here or further up where you can't see it if it's hidden. Okay. So it looks like it would be alternate, but if you come up here, right up here where the cursor is, you see this little node here, and on opposite sides of the twig, 2 buds, right? One on this side, one on that side. Okay. And so if I had a wider angle of this particular tree branch, you would see this repeating pattern again. Okay, so the buds are on opposite sides of each other. And sometimes it is a little tricky again, because sometimes they're a little bit close to each other, or they can be slightly off on angle. And that again is why you want to look at multiple kind of nodes or parts of that twig. Okay, so this is opposite. So this could be an ash. Oop, sorry. Okay, last one. If we're looking at these here, okay, do you think this is opposite or alternate? Can you tell? Oop, I did it again. I keep clicking on the wrong thing. These are alternate. Okay, so here we go. We trace along this branch out to the tip, and we see how these little side branches all come out in that zigzag pattern. Okay, and you see it all throughout these tree branches here, and it's consistent enough that you can say with confidence it's not a case of, you know, oh, these other, you know, side branches fell off. Okay, this is consistent enough to show up as an alternating pattern. Okay, over here on this side, you can see that there are some actual opposite, a tree that is opposite. Okay, I'm hoping that's clear so far. Okay, so it has broad leaves, not needles. It's opposite. It could be an ash. So now we move on to our next step. And in this case, we're going to assume that it's summer and there are leaves. So you would look at the leaves at this point. Okay. And there are basically 2 types of leaves that we're looking at. One is known as a simple leaf, and that is sort of this classic leaf where you have a stem that attaches to the twig, and what we refer to as the leaf blade. Okay. And it's one single piece, and it attaches to the stem here. And typically with a leaf, there will be a little bud, next year's growth, nestled right in along the twig, just above where the leaf stalk comes in. This is called a simple leaf. So think of maples, linden trees, oak trees, which have simple leaves, one single leaf. Okay. And then the other one, and apologize, slightly complicated picture, are compound leaves. In a compound leaf, you have a leaf stalk that attaches to your twig with a little bud nestled in there. And then instead of one single blade, it's divided up into what are known as leaflets. okay, little leaflets, okay? And these can be very complicated types of leaves, okay? So simple leaf on the left, compound leaf on the right. Most tree species that we find around here will have simple leaves, and here's the good news. If it's a simple leaf, it's not an ash, okay? If you have a single little leaf like that, it is not going to be an ash tree, okay? So here are a couple of images of ash leaves, okay? So what we're looking at right here is an entire leaf, okay? So note that we have a central stalk, and we have, in this case, 7 leaflets that attach to that stalk, that leaf stalk by a little stalk, okay? Here on the right is another ash leaf. This was actually in the field, not out yet. You can't really see it, but nestled right in the base of the leaf stalk here is a little bud that will be future growth, okay? So ash leaves will typically have 7, 9, or even 11 leaflets arranged on the main stem, okay? And it is always in this arrangement where they are side and one terminal, okay? So there are actually a couple of species just to watch for that we may encounter here, especially in ornamental settings, like on a lawn or a park, that have the combination of opposite and compound. One of them is the horse chestnut and buckeyes. This is not an ash. And if you can tell, in this case, this is a compound leaf. So this whole thing right here is one single leaf with 5 leaflets, but this is arranged like the palm of a hand. Like if I stick my hand up here in front of the camera, right? It comes out of a central part and is in a sort of what's known as a palmate pattern. Okay, and let me go back to our ash for a second. All right, our ash is not palmate; it's what's called pinnate. Okay, and then we do have something else that has compound leaves that might be confused with ashes: hickories, walnuts, and sumacs. These are not an ash, and the way you can tell is you will look at the branches and you will see that they are alternate. Okay, so this leaf here from some kind of a hickory looks fairly similar to our ash tree, but it would be arranged on the twig in an alternate pattern. Okay, and now we look at this one. Okay, and we see, if you can tell, we see that it is opposite. There's a leaf here. This is all one leaf, and there's another one that grows here, and these grow opposite each other. It is compound. Okay, this is one single leaf with 5 leaflets, but it's not an ash. Not an ash. This is a box elder, and the box elder is a type of maple. It is the only maple we have semi-native here that has compound leaves. So this will drive you crazy. Okay, so if you're not sure, at this time of year, box elders will still have, many of them will still have maple seeds on them, that classic maple seed, that twin maple seed shape. But this is where you go back and look at the twig. Right? And I'm throwing out more terminology here, and I apologize for that. But if you look at a twig for an ash tree, okay, you will see that in most times of the year, it will have a brown bud. Okay. And then we look at what's known as the leaf scar. This is where last year's leaf fell off the tree. Okay. And you notice it's kind of large. And if you look in it, it has this sort of line. Can everybody see that? I hope you can see that. These are what are known as bundle scars. And that's where the vascular tissue, the veins basically entered the tree. Okay. And in an ash tree, that bundle scar, they're blended together. They form sort of a line. It looks like a smiley face. Sometimes it looks like a slice of watermelon almost. Okay. Over here on the right, we're looking at a maple twig, and this has a slim slim leaf scar, and within it you see 1, 2, 3, whoops, very distinct, um, very distinct bundle scars. Man, I keep doing that. Okay, so we look again. Ash leaf, ash twig has a large leaf scar with blended bundle scars, and the maple has this sort of slim with 3 distinct scars in it. So the summary: opposite branching, compound leaves, and the leaf scar shows many bundle scars blended into a line. That is basically how you tell your ash from your elbow. Okay. And again, Amy did send a link to a guide from showing very simply how to tell them apart. There's a couple of other guides that'll be on the resource page as well. Okay, so that's the nutshell. It's a little more it's somewhat complicated. It may feel complicated until you do it a few times. It gets fairly easy. Okay. So, and again, if you have questions, pop it up in the chat, and we'll go from there. Otherwise, we will move on to the signs and symptoms of emerald ash borer. Okay. So the one thing about this is you are very unlikely to actually see emerald ash borer adults, because they feed up high in the canopy, and the larvae are something that you would kind of have to peel the bark off of a tree to see, and you don't really want to do that for the most part. Okay, so instead we have to do our diagnostics by kind of looking at the symptoms, looking at the impact they have on a tree. Okay, so there are 5 main symptoms that we're going to look at that are divided into categories on whether it's possible signs of emerald ash borer, probable signs of emerald ash borer, and definite. So our first one is crown thinning, and I'm going to explain each of these in a little bit more detail. This is a possible sign of emerald ash borer. Second is epicormic branching, also a possible sign. Third sign, now we're moving into probable indications of emerald ash borer, is what's known as blonding. And then we get into definite signs of emerald ash borer, called D-shaped exit holes, serpentine galleries, which we've already seen on one of the earlier images, but we'll go into a little more detail. And then actually, not a sign and not an indication, but if you see larvae, if you actually see larvae, then that's even beyond a sign and a symptom. That is an absolute DEFCON 1, you have it. Okay, so we're going to go into each of these in a little more detail. First one is crown thinning. So over on the right is an image of a healthy ash tree growing in a field somewhere. And when you look at that, you know, this is a nice midsummer tree. That canopy, the foliage is lush. It's nice and green. It's dense. You can't really see through it. It casts a nice deep shade. Okay. Contrast that with trees that have emerald ash borer infestation. And you see that what's happening here is that the insects particularly get started in the high branches. The larvae will start tunneling through in these upper branches, and as you have an infestation, they're cutting off basically the flow of water and nutrients through the tree. So branches will start to die back. Okay, and the first indication is that this is occurring is that you have this thinning of the canopy. So looking at this image here on the left, this looks like a tree in fall. You'd look at this and say, oh, this is, you know, October, or, you know, late September or October. But when you look at the background, if you can see those trees down there in the background, those are green. That's a maybe late summer tree. Okay, and instead we have foliage that is very pale and yellow, dead branches up in the canopy. Okay, the image on the right, again, you see that this tree has very, very thin foliage. Okay, it is a thinning crown. Okay, here's a couple of other images of this, again, on street trees. The ash is in the foreground in both pictures. Actually, in this photo on the right, you can see that everything on kind of this side of the street is an ash, and everything has severe impact to the crown, right? There's very few leaves left on it. What's there is kind of thin. And then in the background, you have these big, probably maples that are thick, dense canopy. Okay, so this is listed as a possible symptom of emerald ash borer, because there are other pests that can cause this sort of impact. There's a soil fungus called verticillium that when it gets into the tree itself, it will clog the vascular tissue and cause similar features. So if you see your ash tree is starting to have this thinning of the crown, it doesn't definitely mean you have emerald ash borer, but it means you need to take a closer look and see, um, what's going on there. Whoop. So I will also say that, we've done some surveys of ash trees up at Mohican Farm where our office is. And when you're standing under some of these trees and you look up, it's almost like, you're in July, and it's almost like they've just leafed out. You know how trees will sometimes have, the leaves are very small, they seem small. It seems more like a springtime tree in a way, because the crown is thin, because there's fewer leaves on it. Okay. Our next sign of a possible sign is what is known as epicormic branches or sprouts. Okay. Many species of trees have dormant buds, what are called epicormic buds, that are along the trunk or along the limbs. And normally these are suppressed by hormones that are produced by the leading shoots and the leading branches. Okay. When the branches start to die off, that hormone, that suppressive hormone, goes away. And that enables these other branches to start to sprout. I kind of say that this is where the tree starts to look a little bit like a chia pet. Okay. So you see here on this particular tree, all of these shoots that are growing rather semi-vigorously directly out of the trunk. Right? And again, okay, on the right, we see, there's some sprouting right off of the main trunk here, and also further up on the where the trunk divides, very bushy, like I said, sort of like a chia pet. On the left, you see this small planting of ash trees by a parking lot that, it has both crown thinning, completely bare crown, and epicormic branching all happening at the same time. Okay. Now, again, there are other stressors that can come that can cause this sort of behavior. Crown thinning, epicormic branches can be caused by other injuries. They can be caused by stressors such as, droughts, and if you're having crown thinning in particular, would be caused by things like droughts and heat stress, root impaction. The epicormic branching would be a result of some other injuries, or again, some of that verticillium fungus. Okay, so again, if you're seeing this happening on your ash tree, this is an indicator. It's a possible sign. Okay, possible sign of emerald ash borer. You want to take a closer look. Okay. Next one is known as blonding. Okay, so we see this tree on the right, which has, your kind of traditional gray brownish bark, and then these very, very light patches up and down here. Okay, this is a result of woodpecker activity. So I said that there aren't a whole lot of natural predators for emerald ash borer in the United States, but woodpeckers love them. Okay, and they will forage on trees, infested trees, and what they're looking for is not so much the adults, but for the larvae that are underneath. So as they're foraging on the tree, what they'll do is they'll kind of pick at the bark a little bit, and they'll flake away the outer layer of the bark, revealing sort of this sublayer. And it's pale because it hasn't been exposed to the elements at all. It hasn't weathered in any sort of way. So they'll be working along the bark. They'll peck at the bark. They'll fleck pieces of bark away. Sometimes, if you're looking, you will see irregular shaped holes within that bark. I don't have a good image of that, where they've actually dug something out. Okay, so this is it on a street. Okay. Again, more examples. The leftern picture shows, again, sort of a street or home tree. Very fresh woodpecker activity here, where they've really chipped away the bark trying to find emerald ash borer larvae. Oop, I keep doing that. I gotta be gentle. Okay. Over on the right, we see this looks like a single ash tree in a forest setting. Note how much that stands out. If you're familiar with sycamore trees, which have that white and peely bark, it almost looks like a sycamore tree out there, but it's definitely not. Okay, very much standing out. Okay, and also here, again, those couple of trees in the middle showing this blonding. And blonding will very typically first show up higher up on the branches. And the emerald ash borer will start out at the top, and they work their way down basically as they're running out of fresh vascular tissue. They'll start laying their eggs further down the tree. So you're going to look for blonding up at the top. And again, this is considered a probable sign of emerald ash borer. Okay, ash trees are susceptible to other types of tunneling and wood boring insects that woodpeckers would go after, but they don't typically exist in the sort of numbers in a healthy ash tree that is going to bring about this level of woodpecker activity. So if you're seeing blonding, this is particularly in conjunction with crown thinning and with epicormic branches, then it's almost certain, okay, but not quite certain. And again, one more. I thought I took this one out. All right. Now we get into the definite sign of emerald ash borers, D-shaped exit holes. So back to the biology of the ash borer, the larva tunnels beneath the bark for a couple of months. It goes into a resting stage, becomes a pupa, transitions to that bright green adult, and the adult will tunnel its way back through the bark, emerge onto the bark, and then fly up into the tops of the trees to feed. Okay, it leaves behind this very distinct hole that is flat on one side and rounded on the other, very much like the letter D. And here you see another one. It's a little bit curved on the bottom, but not very much. Okay, so it's a D-shaped exit hole, and this is definitive. If you see this on your ash tree, you have emerald ash borer, because there's only one way that hole's going to get there. Okay, just for scaling, the size of this, they are about maybe up to 5 millimeters across, 3 to 5 millimeters across. So these are pretty small, right? There it is in comparison to a dime. Again, you see several of them. Here's a piece of bark that was flecked away by a woodpecker, but I guess it didn't get the larva that ended up making this hole. Okay, so again, if you're seeing this, and these are tough to see, and you're not going to see them unless, if not in the upper branches, unless you climb the tree. If you're seeing these on the trunk of a big ash tree, it's very late in the game for it. Okay? The other definitive sign is those serpentine galleries that we referred to earlier. Okay, so in some cases that bark will actually split a little bit if there's an infestation going on. It gets loosened from the rest of the trunk and it can split, and you'll see these galleries beneath. Again, there's nothing else that makes a gallery shaped like this. So if you see this on your ash tree, it's guaranteed. And if you're doing any removal on your property, if you're taking down any ash trees in your property or woodlot, once the tree is down, it's not a bad idea to peel some of the bark and take a look underneath and see if you're seeing this. That'll give you an idea of whether you have the ash borer or not. Okay? And again, in very advanced stages, this is the sort of thing we're looking at. Instead of a very almost orderly kind of coiling back and forth, you get this thing that looks like a kid scribbled on the tree with reckless abandon. Okay. So I just want to kind of look at something else for a second, because I mentioned that there are other critters that will leave things. Are these the result of emerald ash borer? The answer is no. Okay, so if we take a look back, the exit holes that we're seeing here are too small and they're round. Okay, these are round, and this is something, if you're looking and you see a hole on the tree and you initially say, oh my gosh, it's a D-shaped exit hole, change your perspective a little bit, kind of move up and down to see it a little better, because I know that I found an exit hole that was the right size on an ash tree up in Burlington last year, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's a D-shaped exit hole. And then I bent down a little to get a closer look, and as I shifted down, it changed the angle, and I realized I was looking at something that was round. It just appeared different. Okay, so on the left, again, we're seeing round exit holes. On the right, these galleries, this remnant gallery in a tree, you notice that these are lines that are going pretty much straight line, horizontal across the bark. Okay, this is made by some other insect pest that probably infected, that attacked a tree that was already compromised from some other reasons. Okay, so you just want to make sure before you declare that something is the emerald ash borer. Okay, so this is not, but you've gone through the stages. You've identified yourself that you have an ash tree. You have found definitive signs of the emerald ash borer, or enough probable signs. You found galleries, you found D-shaped exit holes. Now what do you do? Okay, first step is you're going to document. Okay? And what that means is you want to get photographs of the damage and of the insect itself if possible, but also of the damage. So image of the galleries, image of the crown thinning or the blonding. Okay, and then you want to include all of this in an email that you will include the date and time you found it, where, and that can be a street address, GPS location. If it's in a state park or a county park, the name of the park, and maybe information about where on the trail you found it, if that's the case. Okay, and any other description or details that can help somebody look at this. Okay, and your contact information. And you want to send that off initially to actually the first one, foresthealth@dec.ny.us. Okay, this is the Forest Health Lab of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. They are not actively managing emerald ash borer, but what they will do is they will make sure that they're interested in knowing where it's spreading, okay, where it's going, and especially if it's in places that it has not been seen before. Okay, and if you're not sure, like if you find some evidence of it, but you're not entirely sure, they will also confirm for you that it is. And if it's on your property, they can give you some advice about tree care and what to do from there. Okay. Also, if you're inclined to do this, there's a GIS-based program called IMAP Invasives. It does require a little bit of training to do so. This is one of those things that if you're inclined to get an account, an IMAP account, and post the location along with photos and where it is, that helps other people to access that data and find out where this creature is spreading. And if it's in Otsego County in particular, let us know. You can email me, Program Director at OCCAinfo.org, because we are also interested in where this is and where it's going, okay, and where it's been, right? So, but that's not necessarily what you want to know in terms of the now what. You want to know, for example, that if it's on your property, what do you do? There are several options. Ooh, did I? Okay. I think I put my slides slightly out of order. So there are several chemical treatment options that are available that include foliar spray which goes after the adults. There are direct trunk injections of particular types of insecticides that are effective on killing off larvae and also preventing them from kind of getting started. The previous slide, insecticide options for protecting ash trees from emerald ash borer, is published on the emeraldashborer.info site, which is very, very good. Another good site of information. Okay. Whether or not you choose to do some sort of chemical treatment plant would depend on a number of factors. It depends on your own personal philosophy. Not everybody wants to use it. And I certainly understand that, but it also depends on the state of the tree. You would not want to be treating a tree that is heavily infested because it's going to be too late. You would not want to necessarily treat a tree that is, where there's no emerald ash borer for hundreds of miles around. I know, again, we had the question from someone over in Worcester asking about that. And, it's not officially, we don't know that it's in Worcester yet. It's probably heading that way. You would want to consult with arborists and with foresters on this about, if you should treat your tree and where, okay? The other issue is depending on where that tree is. Is it a single tree on your property, which is something that you may be able to treat and take care of. Some of the treatments are very effective and can actually last from 5 to 7 years. Can be effective for 5 to 7 years. Okay? They're not cheap though. Okay? Um, which can run probably for a few $100s per tree, depending on the size of the tree, and what you end up using. Okay? Um, Other options are to remove and replace. Okay, um, take cutting down the tree to get some value out of it, to prevent it from potentially dying and falling on your house or car. Um, or again, getting some value out of the ash trees that you have on your wood lot while you still can is also a viable strategy. If you have trees on your property that you'd probably want to replace with something that is suitable for the site, and not too expensive. The advantage to this is that you choose the time and place of removal, and get to spread out the cost of it, rather than having a crisis situation where suddenly you have to take 3 trees down, and that's kind of expensive, and can you afford it? So you know the one of the downsides to removing trees wholesale, especially before they show any signs of infestation, is that you are potentially removing beetle resistant individuals from the gene pool. Okay, and there is actually some evidence that there is beetle resistance in a small segment of the population, which kind of gets me to this other part. The option is to leave it, and this is particularly if your tree is not in a place where it can do harm if it's infested and starts to die. Okay, so you can leave it. There's a program called Monitoring and Managing Ash, where one of the things that they are looking for is what's known as lingering ash, and these are all the ash trees in a particular area have been killed except 1 or 2 of them. And that way they're looking to actually preserve that genetic material and help create a naturally beetle resistant stock. Okay, whoops, monitoring and managing ash. Okay. Um, there's also seed banking collections that are going on through the National Seed Laboratory, and regionally through the Mid-Atlantic Regional Seed Bank, where you collect ash seeds. The purpose here is to establish a nice seed bank of ash, with lots of genetic variability, and that is local, adapted to local conditions, so that someday perhaps they'll replant ash trees that are native to Otsego County, let's say, that came from stock that grew in this climate, as opposed to replacing it with stuff that is adapted for South Carolina, let's say. Okay, so that's a definite option. I do want to go back one item. If we go back to our chemical treatment too, chemical treatment is something that is not going to work in a woodlot setting. So while there are foliar sprays that are effective on adults, we're not looking at fogging an entire forest lot. It's not really feasible, not economically feasible, and probably not safe. Okay, but again, for an individual tree or a tree of particular value, this is certainly an option. Okay. And sorry, if you have a woodlot area too, I would also recommend getting in touch with the Master Forest Owners Program, and they will be able to help you, manage your woodlot from a standpoint of, how to maximize some value, how to maintain it as wildlife quality, how to properly manage your ash plants. And let's see, it looks like there are possibly some questions in here. Now Amy has been posting some of these links as we go, so those are there. So I'm roughly done. I did want to mention a few other programs that we have coming up. Tomorrow is a heat pump installation webinar at noon. On May 20th, Danny Lappin, our planner, is covering the power of planning before and after the pandemic. June 7th, we have our first officially scheduled water chestnut pulling event at Goodyear Lake, where we will be out on the lake pulling water chestnut. There's an asterisk there because that is COVID dependent, and figuring out if we can do this in a way that is, maintaining proper social distancing. We shall see. And then in June 10th, we'll have another spotlight on invasives where we'll be covering aquatics to watch at noon to 1 p.m. So I hope you will consider joining us. And if people have questions, please, ask. I hope I've covered and given you information that is helpful. And, I thank you very much for your time.
Jeff, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. This is Amy. I'm just jumping in to let you know we have another webinar that's actually going to be coming up on May 27th. So this is going to be an informational webinar for nonprofits and advocates who are interested in learning how to go digital. So how to take your content online. It's going to be an interactive webinar for folks who are interested in doing outdoor videos or webinars or a combination of all of those things. So it just recently came up and hasn't even gotten added to the official network news, and you're the first to know. So I figured I'd let you know.
Thanks, Amy.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for giving us this information.
You're welcome.
And anyone, if you do have a question that pops up later, feel free to email Jeff directly at Program Director at OCCinfo.org.
Okay, and we did get a question about where will the new video be posted?
Great question. Once this video is set, it'll be posted both on our website, on our social media, and anyone who participated or at least signed up for the program will receive it in their email.
Very good. Thank you. And we do have other videos from other programs I should mention that are available at our YouTube. Is it called a page or a channel, whatever it's called? And you can get to there via our website, OCCAinfo.org. There is a YouTube icon up at the top, and that will be how to access this and other programs.
All right.
So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day and stay healthy.
All right. Bye, everyone.